the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God,
God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Saint Gabriel,
Pray for
Pray
us.
for us.
all,
Pray for
pray.
us.
Son, Holy Spirit, amen.
Amen.
Okay, so so our topic for today will be discussing conjugal love, meaning to say the love between a man and his wife, both as a gift from God, but at the same time, for this love to actualize itself and intensify over time, it's also a task that calls for the grace of God, you know. So here's a quick run through of the main points that we're going to take up. Okay, so of course, in conjugal love, a man loves a woman, his wife, you know, because she's a woman, and precisely insofar as she's a woman. So, and this means to say that the attraction and the desire, okay, which are natural, instinctive reactions of the body that husband and wife feel for each other, have to be transformed into true love. Okay, so this involves being aware of the distinction of simple attraction, okay, for your spouse, the difference between simple attraction and love as attraction. And then we're going to see how conjugal love is a love that involves wanting the good and only what's good for one spouse. That's what you call love of goodwill. Okay, so conjugal love is love between husband and wife that involves love as attraction. Okay, so we're going to explain what that means. Love as desire, love of goodwill, and love of betrothal. Okay, so all of these four dimensions of conjugal love is what we hope to bring out here in this class. And we're going to see how the original sin, okay, the fall of our first parents, severely impaired this, okay? Limiting the union between husband and wife to, just simple attraction, which may come and go, or simple desire again, which may come and go. How therefore, the subordination of sensuality to affectivity, and both of these, the sexual dimension to the personal dimension, became like impossible without the help of God's grace. And we'll see this, in the Genesis account of how ashamed and how afraid Adam and Eve were at the consciousness of their being naked. Okay, so the nakedness of the human body had a completely different meaning, before and after original sin. And we're going to talk, therefore, about the need for God's grace and the need to live chastity in marriage. In order for intellect and will, okay, which is the spiritual part of man, to govern and to rule over sensuality and sentiment, so that the sexual dimension is always subordinated or ordained to the personal dimension in conjugal love, in conjugal relationships. 4 commitments are involved here. Okay? 4 commitments manifest or are underlying, this dominion of the spiritual part of man to the bodily part of man, the bodily dimension, because both spirit and body are involved in conjugal love. Okay, so the first commitment that must be made, okay, and of course, when you say commitment, that involves a decision where intellect and will come into play. And again, let me say this, the help of God's grace. the first commitment is never to limit the strong attraction that one has, okay, or may have, because sometimes this attraction wanes. Okay, so never to limit the strong attraction one has for one spouse to his or her sensual and sentimental values alone. Okay, so as time goes on, obviously the physical appearance changes, and also the emotions do change, and therefore the good that one has to be attracted to, because we're always attracted to some good. Okay, we're never attracted to something ugly. Okay? So we're always attracted to something good, something beautiful, something that's true. So the good that one must be attracted to should be, above all, the intrinsic worth of the person, and not merely something possessed by the person. So in other words, I should love the person for what he or she is, and not for what he or she has. So if I love a person, so the spouse, because she's charming, because she's beautiful, because she's pleasant to be with, once that's affected, and many circumstances can affect that, then that means to say that my love for her will be affected too. And that cannot be, because conjugal love is a love that is total, unconditional, and that's for life, that commitment. So true love, okay, this has to be emphasized, and this is a commitment, okay, means loving the other just as he or she is. And this means with defects, because nobody is perfect. Okay, everybody has his or her own limitations, and we love the person just as he or she is. Okay, for what you are. Okay, so love me for what I am, or don't love me at all. Yes, that song goes. So the lyrics of that song goes. So the best examples I can give you here are, from the gospel, the love of the father for his prodigal son, the younger of the two sons, and also the love of the father for the elder son, okay, who also was so proud and haughty, and he may have been complying with all his obligations as a son, but really his heart was very distant from the father. And yet how the father still loved both sons, the younger son, the prodigal son, and the older son, in spite of their defects, and rejoiced when the younger son had a change of heart, and celebrated, to the anger, and disappointment. Of course, it's an understatement of the older son. Okay, and then what our Lord said about loving your enemies. Right? That if we love only those who love us, or we love only those who honor us, or who are nice to us, or who are congenial to us, okay? Then we're not doing anything special, okay? Because any Tom, Dick, and Harry can do this, okay? So we should be like our Father in heaven, who makes his sun shine on the good and the evil, and the rain to fall on those who are good and those who are bad. Okay, so that means loving the other person just as he or she is, with his or her defects. And if those defects offend God, if they're sins, or if they make social life or family life difficult or tense, well, we help that person overcome those defects, but of course always with a lot of patience, never showing irritation, never showing exasperation. Of course, that's a tall order, and that's only possible with the help of God's grace, because this is the way God loves us, and that love comes from above, okay, which we have to open our heart to. So there's a big difference therefore between mere attraction, sexual attraction, and love as attraction. Okay. So, this is what conjugal love involves, love as attraction, because sensuality and sentiment alone, they can suffice for simple attraction between spouses, obviously. But for love as attraction, to be present, then the spiritual part of man has to come in, the intellect. okay, and the will, and the grace of God. Because as Karl Wojtyła, John Paul II explains, love as attraction doesn't mean just thinking about that person as a certain good, okay? Okay, there's a good and I'm attracted to it, but a commitment to think about that person as a certain good. So, and here, an example I can give you is one involving Saint Therese of the Child Jesus, because, in the Carmelite convent, because there were, some people she found very congenial, other people she didn't find congenial to her taste, and she said in her autobiography that if the devil starts tempting her with negative thoughts about a person, everything that I just see the person and there's just so many critical negative thoughts, judgmental thoughts that come, okay? Because that's what the devil does when he wants to create barriers between people. He makes us focus on the objective or imagined defects of that person, okay? And sometimes magnify them. Well, what she does is that she focuses, she rejects all those negative thoughts, and she focuses on all the good qualities that sister has, and she said, if I can think of no good quality, okay, because sometimes that happens, we're just colored by our emotions, then she says, I tell myself that it's perhaps maybe that sister is so humble I don't realize it, or because I really don't know her enough, and that's why I don't see it. Okay, so that's a commitment, to have a charitable mind all the time and not to judge people. So that's love as attraction. And then there's another component in married love, and that's desire. So there's a strong desire for that one spouse, because she satisfies certain biological or emotional needs I have. So the next commitment is never to desire one spouse merely as someone who is good for me, okay, because she satisfies something that I need. I love you because I need you, but always and above all, to desire her as someone who is good in herself. Of course, because we can only desire what's good. Okay, so we cannot love or desire what's evil, okay, what we perceive as evil. We always desire something that's good. So always above all, to commit oneself to desire that person as someone who is good in herself and hence lovable for her own sake. So in other words, the beloved, one's spouse, is recognized as someone who's good for me because she is good in herself. Okay, and that requires rising above sensuality and sentiment. Okay, because alone sensuality and sentiment, of course, they engender a strong desire for one spouse as someone good for me. Okay, because there's something I lack. Okay, sexuality per se is a source of limitation in the human being. Precisely, there's a diversity, okay, of sexes. What the female has, the male doesn't have, and the female can provide, and vice versa. So only intellect and will, with the help of God's grace, enable us to rise above our instinctive and sentimental responses and only desire one spouse as a good for me, okay? But above all, as somebody, desire her as a good in herself. And how do you manifest this? How is this governance of, intellect and will seen? Well, it's to treat the other person with respect, okay? Showing gratitude, appreciation, affirmation, encouragement, and treat that person with veneration, okay? And with refinement, to say thank you, to say please, not to say things that we know might, she might find demeaning, okay? Or she's not worth anything, okay? So everything she does is wrong, okay? So treat the person with affection, with charity, and also with purity, okay? Because lust, as we will see later on, can can enter the picture and corrode the relationship between husband and wife. Okay, so to live purity very well. Okay, and this means not only in our relationship with our wife, but to live purity by ourselves, in our mind, in our thoughts, in our desires. Okay, so here we can just point out, by way of a footnote, the deleterious effects of pornography. Okay, so they have corrosive effects on the husband and wife relationship and the intimacy, okay, that they must have and respect for each other. Okay, now, another dimension of conjugal love is this commitment to always and in everything seek the good of one's spouse. The overall good, the total good, the good in the overall good of one's spouse, to want her to be truly good in every dimension of her life, and this means physically, emotionally, and of course, especially morally and spiritually. Okay, so this love of goodwill that is a integral part of conjugal love is the same as to be selfless, okay, in loving, because it means to say to one spouse, I long for that which is good for you, and only for that which is good for you. So, meaning to say, I'm not saying I love you for my sake, because to love somebody for my sake, that's what you call love of concupiscence. Okay? So, but you say, I love you above all for your own sake, okay? For your own good. I want to proactively promote what is truly good for you overall, okay? And that's what you call love of goodwill or love of benevolence. Benevolence comes from two Latin words, bene, okay, that's to, and volo, to will, okay? So to will only what is good for one's spouse. So note the difference, okay? If you're remaining only on the level of sensuality and affectivity or sentimentality, sensual satisfaction and emotional delight are only partial goods, which may or may not be objectively good. But love of goodwill seeks and actively promotes that which is good for the whole person. Okay. So, and only the intellect can know what is good for the whole person. Okay. Again, this means physically, emotionally, and especially the moral and spiritual good. And how is this seen? This love of goodwill in the everyday dealings between husband and wife? Well, here are just some examples. To willingly yield to her legitimate preferences and tastes. Okay, so I recall there was one story. This didn't happen in the Philippines. There was this seminarian at that time. He was in the International Seminary of Opus Dei in Rome, and Saint Josemaria Escrivá was still alive. And he told Saint Josemaria in a get-together that his parents had just celebrated their golden wedding anniversary. And he told them an anecdote, and I just found out that my mom and dad, their pastime, every weekend was to watch the bullfights. Okay, so that was their way of relaxation, to go and watch bullfights and bullfighting. And it was only after 50 years of doing this, every weekend together, that his father finally disclosed to his wife, okay, that if she didn't mind, okay, this is the way he put it. If you don't mind, I prefer that we stop going to the bullfights, because, truth to tell, I've never enjoyed going to the bullfights. That was the first time he had ever, confided to his wife that he had no, taste for watching bullfights. In this case, it was the woman who liked the bullfights. Usually it's the other way around. And and then the wife said, well, okay, that I don't mind, because the bullfighters nowadays are not as good as they were before. Okay, so that's one way of showing love of goodwill. That person made no mention at all about how it was not really entertainment for him. So of course, maybe here in this case, in the Philippines, I recall a guy who says, well, every evening he says, I spend some time with my wife watching K-drama, because my wife loves K-drama and she enjoys it even better if I'm with her watching K-drama. They say, personally, I don't like K-drama, okay, but just for the sake of my wife, I watch K-drama, okay, and then that gives us topic for conversation afterwards. Okay, so that's yielding to the legitimate preferences and tastes of one's spouse. And then another one is knowing when to keep silent, okay, not to say anything, like huwag sabayan ng galit, okay, when to keep silent and when to speak, and to know what to say, how to say it, and where's the best place, where best to say it. Okay, so that also shows love of goodwill. I want what is really good for that person. Here I can give you an example. In the Confessions, Saint Augustine writes something about Saint Monica, his mother, and it was about his father, who had a terrible temper. His father was a pagan, okay, and he had a terrible temper. And the neighbors, the comadres of Saint Monica, would tell her that that they were really surprised that with the temper that her husband had, he had never laid a hand on her. Okay, because apparently in those times, well, bugbog yung asawa kung galit yung husband, So, and especially with a temper like the husband that Saint Monica had, that's why they were telling her. They were really surprised that he has never, after all of these years, laid a hand on you. And Saint Augustine said, that's because my mother, was very discreet. If she wanted to point something out to her husband, she waited for the right time. She waited for the right place, and she said it in the right way. Okay, so that the husband actually appreciated it. So that's a sign of love of goodwill, knowing how to bring these points up that might otherwise irk, irritate, or make the other person just flare up. Okay, so and then another example is make one spouse feel appreciated, supported, affirmed, okay, encouraged with her talents, in her interests. Make the wife feel that she's listened to, so we just listen, we don't make any comment, and in that way the wife feels understood. Here I can give you an example, but it's mother-daughter relationship, not husband and wife. So and one mother was telling this priest, that she was very disappointed because her daughter, which was now a a teenager, she no longer would confide in her mother, because when that girl was growing up, there were no secrets between the two of them. The daughter was always opening up, making cuento to the mother, telling her what was in her heart, the way she felt. They were really best of friends. But then as the daughter grew up and entered her teen years, it was now the yaya. She was confiding in, and just pouring out her heart to the yaya and not to the mother. And so the mother felt, bad about this, and then brought the daughter aside. We used to be the best of friends. You had no secrets from me. Now you don't confide anything to me. It's always to your yaya. And then the daughter said, kasi mommy, parati kang may sinasabi, no? So si Yaya nakikinig lang, kaya komportable ako sa kanya. Ikaw parating may kailangan sabihin sa akin. So the mother said, but I'm your mother, I'm not your Yaya. but precisely, that's why the daughter, felt that the mother always had to point out something to her, something she had to correct, or something that was not right, was the yaya was just listening. Okay, so anyway, that's an example. And okay, and then of course, you will have noticed that these previous commitments, they're common to all friendships. Okay, they're important to sustain true interpersonal relationships. Okay, but this one here now involves conjugal life specifically. Okay, you only find this in conjugal love, and that is that conjugal love involves a love of betrothal, okay, which you don't find in other kinds of relationships of friendship. Okay, so what does that mean? This is a commitment to always and in everything remain faithful to one's total, exclusive, self-giving to one's spouse in everything that is conjugal. Because remember, to get married means I give myself to my spouse in and through my sexuality. Okay, the man, insofar as his masculinity is concerned, no longer belongs to himself, but exclusively to his wife, and vice versa. Okay, so to remain faithful to one's total and exclusive and unconditional self-giving to one's spouse in everything that is conjugal. Now, when I say everything that is conjugal, I'm referring to everything that refers to married and family life. Okay. So how is this manifested? Okay. So here are some examples. Well, husband and wife who are really one heart, one soul, in their relationship, they consult one another always regarding their plans, regarding their schedules, even regarding their expenses. And in matters regarding family finances, they always, talk to each other. Nobody goes unilaterally his or her own way. Okay, of course, each couple has his own style or her own style or their own style insofar as managing family finances are concerned. But the point I want to make is, they always consult, even their plans and who they're going out with and what time they're going to be back. Okay, and there's always unity and harmony and mutual involvement insofar as the upbringing, the character upbringing, especially of the children and the education of the children are concerned. Meaning to say, the husband doesn't say, well, okay, I just limit myself to being the provider. I leave everything that has to do with the upbringing of the children to my spouse. That's her job. Well, of course, it shouldn't be like this. So yes, the husband has to be the provider. Okay, in many cases, okay, where the wife, is just full time there. Managing the home, but still he has to get involved, in dealing with the children and building friendships with the children and helping the children grow up. Okay, and then another manifestation of this is that the husband and wife make an effort, to spend, time together. It's just you and me. Okay, let's. I know some couples, they go out on dates once a week. Some couples even twice a week, just to keep that intimacy and togetherness and okay, let's use the word romance, alive. Okay, now here I want to mention an anecdote that Blessed Alvaro del Portillo, the first successor of Saint Josemaria as head of Opus Dei, gave, because he received a letter from a young lady who was engaged to get married. And so she was asking for prayers, of course, sharing with him the happy news, okay, that she was going to get married. But also in that letter, she expressed a certain apprehension, that she had about what she foresaw was going to happen when eventually they got married, because she foresaw that, they'd have to adjust to one another, to yield to each other's plans and live what is that give and take that's so important, in a marriage. And she was afraid that was the way she put it. She was afraid that she might end up losing her personality in marriage. Blessed Alvaro, mentioned, that this is a big temptation, because you're there to give oneself, and if you do this far from, losing your personality, so to speak, your personality is going to get enriched. You're going to mutually help each other grow. And the children are going to see this and they're going to appreciate it. Okay. And they will be brought up because there's unity and harmony. They see it, and mutual respect between their father and their mother. They'll grow up emotionally stable, balanced. Okay. And fit to establish relationships, social relationships of their own, when they grow up and as they grow up. So that's conjugal love as a love of betrothal. Okay, so that's just a summary of what I just explained, the 4 commitments that underline the dominion that the spiritual part should have over sensuality and sentimentality. Okay, now what happened in the original sin? Okay, so when Adam and Eve fell, the ability of the body to express the person, because the body represents the person. Okay, as body persons, we are called to reflect and radiate an image, God, okay, who is love, in and through our body. We're not angel persons. So the ability of the body to express the person and serve as a vehicle to give oneself to another selflessly, okay, was severely impaired when Adam and Eve committed the original sin. Okay, because prior to original sin, they had perfect control over their instincts and emotions. This is what in theology is called the preternatural gift of integrity. Okay, they were whole. The lower part didn't rebel against the higher part. Okay. And this is alluded to in Genesis 2:25 when sacred scripture says that the man and his wife were both naked and they were not ashamed. Okay. Now, John Paul II says something very insightful about this. He says that this absence of shame does not express a lack, but on the contrary, serves to indicate a fullness of consciousness and experience of the true meaning of the body as a substratum for the selfless gift of self to one's spouse. Okay, so it's I point this out, because in Tagalog, once you call a person walang hiya, that's an insult. Okay, that means, what kind of a person is this guy? Nakakahiya ang kanyang ginawa. Okay, so. But here it's the opposite, they were not ashamed because nakedness before original sin was not an occasion for them to objectify the other, to turn the other into an object, okay, a sex object. Okay, in other words, they didn't feel any movement of lust, because lust is the disorderly movement to seek sexual gratification for its own sake, okay, without any reference to love and the total gift of self to the other. Okay, so the end of sexuality therefore becomes pleasure. Sex is for pleasure and for entertainment. Okay, for gratification. You forget completely that that it is for love. It is for the selfless gift of self to one's spouse. Okay, and the sensual delight and the sentimental satisfaction and the spiritual joy, by the way, right? That's also present there. It comes as a fruit of that total, unconditional, selfless gift to the other. Okay, so they didn't experience any lust. But after original sin, we're told in Genesis that then they knew they were naked, and so they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves coverings. In other words, shame. Okay, so John Paul II says that shame, the first time, the original experience of shame, reveals the moment of lust. Okay, they started lusting after each other. So, and Adam and Eve were ashamed of their own lustful desires, for each other. Okay. And together with that, their original experience of fear. Okay. I was afraid because I was naked. Nobody wants to be objectified. If you feel that you're being ogled at and looked at, lustfully, your first instinctive impulse is to protect yourself, to cover yourself, to get away from that lustful look and desire. Okay, so that's why they felt the original experience of fear. Adam and Eve felt fear because of the threat that they felt, that the stirrings of lust pose to their own dignity as persons, because nobody wants to be treated as a thing. Nobody wants to be objectified. Okay. But after original sin, the difference of the male sex and the female sex was felt and understood in a different way. Okay. As an element, an occasion of mutual confrontation, mutual domination, using the other person. Okay. And therefore the original experience of shame and fear. Okay. Now, but there's a flip side to that. Dogs do the most shameful things in public and they don't feel any shame, okay, because they're dogs. They don't have any divine image in them, okay? They don't have any intimacy. They don't know what intimacy and privacy is, okay? They're just biology, passions, and instincts, okay? So that's why the flip side of this is that the shame and fear that Adam and Eve felt also show that they were still aware of their personhood, okay? That the body should be really subjected to the spirit and should be used for love and not as an occasion to dominate, manipulate, or use the other person. Okay, so in other words, they were not walang hiya. Okay, they still had felt that dignity as persons. Okay, so that's where we see the need for grace. Okay, because shame and fear, on one hand, encouraged Adam and Eve to recover the dominion they exercised over their bodies. Okay, and that's why they covered themselves with fig leaves, which, by the way, points to the importance of rediscovering the value of modesty. Okay, so, however, this recovery of the dominion was only possible if their sin was forgiven. Okay, and sanctifying grace was restored. And here, St. Paul in chapters 7 and 8 of his epistle to the Romans gives a very vivid description, and very impactful description of the tension that he felt within himself between the law of sin dragging him downwards and the law of the Spirit, lifting him upwards. But he felt just completely always dragged down, so much so that he ended Romans chapter 7, saying, who will deliver me from this body of death? Okay, because I feel that they just, sin abounds in me, in my body. And then he answers, well, the grace that comes from Jesus Christ. Okay, so what I wanted to emphasize here is that conjugal love can only be a fully human reality with the healing and elevating effect of the grace of Christ that's fruit of the redemption of the body, okay, by Jesus. Okay, when we refer to redemption of the body, we refer to the redemption of the whole man, the whole person, okay, because man is a body person. Okay, so physically, emotionally, mentally, psychically, and of course morally and spiritually. Okay, we need the healing grace of Christ for this. Okay, so this brings us to the last point, chastity in marriage. Chastity is the virtue that inclines a person to properly regulate the sex drive with the help of God's grace, and of course, this requires a chastening of the body. Okay, because otherwise, if we don't chasten our body, then we become the slave of the body. Okay. And it's maybe very timely that we mention this because Ash Wednesday is just around the corner. Now, chastity is to be lived by everybody, okay? Those who are single, those who are prepared to get married, those who are courting, those who have committed themselves to apostolic celibacy, those who are in the widowed state. everybody is called to live chastity. Okay. Now, also married people are called to live chastity. Okay. So it's not true that once you get married, anything goes between husband and wife. That's absolutely not true. Okay. So marital chastity is that virtue which involves the capacity to resist, lust and selfishness getting in the way in the relationship between husband and wife. Okay, and John Paul II describes it as a singular capacity to perceive, okay, to understand, to love, and to practice the nuptial meanings of the language of the body. Okay, because you express yourself, you express your love in and through the body in marriage, and a person who is given to sensuality cannot understand this language. The sensual man cannot understand the things of the spirit, right? It's like sorry for the comparison. It's like a pig who cannot appreciate the music of say Beethoven. Okay, you can only understand what a pig is made for. So so the sensual man cannot understand the language of the things of the spirit. It's foolishness, okay, to that person. So marital chastity makes possible, okay, the progressive enrichment of the marital dialogue, okay, which needs to be purified, deepened, and simplified, through those 4 commitments that I mentioned earlier. And this will enable the spouses, it'll capacitate the spouses, okay, to make use of their respective sexualities, to foster and express and deepen conjugal love as fruit of conjugal love, and the harmony that conjugal love will bring about, and the mutual respect and veneration, to beget and attend to the proper morally healthy. They need to see that their parents respect, love, honor each other, are always together, pulling the cart in the same direction. Okay, so that's the class for today. Okay, good. Okay, let's say a prayer. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary,
That we for sins from the advocate and Father,
Saint Gabriel,
pray for us,
pray for us.
Saint Paul,
pray for us,
Pray for us.
Holy Mary, our hope, seat of wisdom.
pray for us.
Pray for
Father, Son,
us.
Holy Spirit. Amen.
Father, thank you.
Okay, thank you guys.